Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Tuesday, July the 27th, 2021. Let's just adjust this a little bit. There, that's better. Let's talk about sports. Let's talk about the Olympics. Let's talk about quitters. Here's a story from the CBC, Benjamin Bloom. Simone Biles' withdrawal from Olympic event could normalize mental health conversations, experts say. I swear this same story gets written every week with a slightly different headline. Oh, yes, stigma about discussing mental illness. What stigma? What are you talking about? That's all women seem to talk about these days. Yes, four-time gymnastics gold medalist decision seen as step toward destigmatization. The decision of U.S. Olympic gymnast Simone Biles to withdraw from the women's team final to look after her mental health could go a long way toward dispelling stigmas around the issue in sports, experts say. So if having mental health problems turns you into a quitter, that's not a good thing, right? There has always been within the athletic world the emphasis on appearing physically fit and appearing mentally fit, says Katie Kamkar, a clinical psychologist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. Yes, a healthy mind and a healthy body. And that can further perpetuate a kind of silent suffering and self-isolation, but it's not silent suffering that we're getting from Simone Biles or Naomi Osaka, is it? It's very much not silent. So the more we were able to have a very supportive, empathetic conversation, that same as goes with physical health problems, we are able to normalize the conversation. Yeah, okay. Biles, a gymnastics icon with 4 Olympic golds and 19 World Championship titles to her name, withdrew from Tuesday's final following the vault event. I have to focus on my mental health, the 24-year-old said after the event. I just think mental health is more prevalent in sports right now. I have no idea what that sentence means. We have to protect our minds and our bodies rather than just go out there and do what the world wants us to do. Unlike tennis, gymnastics doesn't really have much of an audience. The 4 tennis majors are watched by many, many millions around the world. The only reason why anyone cares about Simone Biles is because she is representing her country in the Olympics. It is nationalism in action. And this woman just has the gall to complain about what the world wants us to do. She said elsewhere that it wasn't fun for her anymore and that she wanted to do it for herself and not for other people, and particularly not for the United States of America. Well, if that's the way this woman thinks, shouldn't she have not allowed herself to be selected for the Olympic team? You know, crashing out after a bad performance and then blaming it on mental health. Taslim Alani Verji, a clinical psychologist and director and founder of the SILM Center for Mental Health in Toronto, commended Biles on prioritizing her well-being. I guess everyone writes like a woman now. I think it's incredible that she was able to have the courage and the insight to say that she couldn't do it or that it wasn't in her best interest to do it and that she is allowed to come first in all of this, Alani Verji told CBC Sports. The team representing the Russian Olympic Committee won gold, while Biles' U.S. teammates earned silver. Yes, and she actually showed up to collect her medal after damaging the team with a bad performance and then dropping out. Biles posted on social media Monday that she felt like she has the weight of the world on her shoulders at times. Yes, that's why you earn the big bucks. I see that one of her sponsors is Nike. And Nike is also one of Naomi Osaka's sponsors. Is Nike somehow pushing? Is Nike behind this whole mental health push? That no, we don't admire athletes because they persevere. No, we admire them because they quit. I'm reminded when Michael Chang, the year he won the French Open, I believe it was in his match with Ivan Lendl, he was suffering terrible pain from leg cramps, and he wanted to quit. And he decided against it. And he explained later that if he had quit that time, every other time he suffered pain while playing, he'd probably quit then too. So no, that's what a real champion does. So Kamkar noted that the stigma around mental health in the sports world has declined over the years due to a strong focus on education and dialogue, but there is still some room for improvement. Of course, there is a further need for improvement. We also know that the stigma around mental illness and health concerns remains present in the athletic world, said Kamkar, who was the medical practitioner for the 2017 Invictus Games in Toronto, where she worked closely with service members and veterans. Alani Verji added that this stigma can have a tangible impact on athletes. When a person shares their mental health struggles, stigma can affect how they're recruited, how they are coached, what opportunities they're allowed to participate in. Again, if mental health means that when you get a case of the SADS, you decide to quit, desert your team, then obviously it's not a good thing, is it? It will affect how the crowd perceives them. It will affect sponsorships. Have Osaka and Beals lost any sponsorships because there are public confessions of mental illness? And unfortunately, because mental health and mental illness are still seen as vulnerabilities and weaknesses and lack of willpower, golly, I wonder why that might be. For an athlete, this could make or break a career. Beals told reporters she's going to take it a day at a time before deciding what to do. Lenny Verji said Beals' decision to look after her own interests first could allow other athletes to vocalize their own need to take a step back from competition if that is what is best for them. Yes, let's praise people for deserting their teammates and letting down their country. I guess this is what makes a hero today. Heroes of suffering, not heroes of victory. Throat today. This is from Nathan Salt in the Daily Mail. Naomi Osaka's bid to become the first Japanese player ever to win tennis Olympic gold came to an abrupt halt as she was beaten in straight sets by Markita Vondrousova in the last 16. The Games was Osaka's first tournament since withdrawing from both the French Open and Wimbledon, citing her struggles with depression and anxiety. She had lit the cauldron in the opening ceremony last week and was Japan's poster girl of their home Olympics. Was this really a good idea? If she's suffering from depression and anxiety, maybe she shouldn't have been Japan's poster girl for the home Olympics, that she should not have lighted the cauldron. Osaka, the world number 2 and a 4-time Grand Slam champion, was considered the tennis tournament favorite once Wimbledon champion and world number 1 Ash Barty suffered a shock round 1 exit, but she admitted pressure got to her today. Having ended her media boycott when she arrived at this tournament, it appeared it was back on as Osaka, 23, made a hasty exit after the loss. But she returned for a couple of questions in what is one of the biggest shocks of the tennis tournament so far. Be used to it by now, she said, but at the same time, the scale of everything has been a bit hard because of the break that I took. I'm glad I didn't lose in the first round, at least. This woman is, 23 years old, and she sounds like she's done. When a Japanese journalist then asked, "How do you feel?" Osaka came close to tears. Unable to respond, she left the mixed zone accompanied by her agent. I was reading about Simone Biles that she's a doper. She uses Ritalin. Supposedly, she suffers from attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which is a diagnosis so vague that almost everyone on Earth could be said to have it. But no, she uses Ritalin, which of course is an amphetamine, and obviously that gives her an advantage, but it's okay with the World Anti-Doping Agency. And I'm so proud of these girls and inspired by their determination to not give up. Simone Biles praises her brave Olympic teammates for stepping up when I couldn't, after she pulled out of team final in shock decision to focus on her mental health. It would probably behoove Simone Biles to keep stum for the rest of the Olympics. And again, from the Mail, she's going to be okay. Simone Biles' birth mother says her daughter will land on her feet, ho-ho, after the Olympic gymnast announced she was pulling out of the team final to focus on her mental health. Well, I'm glad to know that she will be okay. Sorry about that. Here's a thread from someone on Twitter called Wyatt. Long thread. So Simone Biles is a coward and a loser. She is officially the first post-American athlete and a taste of things to come. The people defending her are cowards and allowed this to happen by pumping her up and gaslighting her. Our elite class should be ashamed. So she has attached a bunch of Twitter messages from simps Jordan Chavez. And this to me is what makes her the real GOAT, greatest of all time. No medal could ever amount to the victory of just being a good human. Yes, all must have medals then. Pat McAfee of the Pat McAfee Show tweeted, although I'm just a very dumb sports stooge, I felt obligated to remind you, dear Simone Biles, you're the greatest of all time. Ain't nothing that happens in Tokyo can change that. Your effort, commitment, and unbelievable talent have been a gift to us fans. Cheers. Wyatt comments, walking away from your team because of mental health in the final is not an excuse. Sorry, sweetie, you were in the Olympics. If you have mental health problems, there are hundreds of girls who can take your place. You let down your team and your country. It didn't used to be like this. The American spirit used to exist. People had undying love for their country, real patriotism that allowed them to overcome real challenges and trials. That doesn't exist anymore because America is a shopping mall now, not a country. In 1996, an American girl by the name of Carrie Strong tore her entire, and there's some expletives here, during the final face-off against Russia, a third-degree lateral sprain. She didn't walk off. She didn't get an ambulance ride. She didn't do anything other than ask her coach what needed to be done. He told her, we need this to win. Then history happened, American history, real history. We could go over the racial issues of Simone and how she was put in an unasked for position, black girl magic, that has now in the past years become endemic. Where for America to be good, black men and women have to be the spearhead of everything to fix racism. I wonder if the elites of this country have ever asked themselves it would be a good idea to tell a young girl the country hates her and then ask her to represent the country that hates her and to be the best gymnast ever too. No wonder she walked out. What can we do to fix this? Nothing. America as a real nation is over. It is now just a place like Canada, a shopping mall where people work to buy new things, raise their children to hate their history, a place that nobody would ever really die for to protect. Nothing will realistically be able to bring this country together again after the past few years of mass media hysteria over race and politics. Too many people have been indoctrinated. We are now two countries that are hard to define. And one of my favorite tweets is one celebrating Naomi Osaka, Simone Biles, and Megan Mertz for not being your mental health mules. Yes, username available. I don't know exactly why Megan Mertz is there. This is from Liz Dwyer at Los Angelista. And who is this woman? Okay. I don't know what any of that means. Simone Biles, Naomi Osaka, Megan Mertz, basically in the year 2021, We black women are refusing to be anyone's mental health mule. Love to see it. And it is, there's a clip of what drag queens attached for some reason. Yes. What is Megan Mertz? Is she the modern version of Grace Kelly? What, she was a C+ or B- actress, plain looking, not very good at acting, who married a famous man. Grace Kelly, of course, was one of the greatest movie stars ever, but our standards have fallen considerably since those days. Back to Wyatt. Excuses for the monster they created. It will get worse and worse until the money runs out. The Olympics is about national pride and the perfection of the human athletic technique. Mental illness does not exist at this level of sports. It's called pressure. Somebody who is mentally ill doesn't make it to the Olympics and never will. Will we still be talking about this goat in 10 years? Doubtful. Who knows? Maybe they will build statues of her for her bravery of being black and losing. However, this would not have occurred in 1996. This would not have occurred in 2000, maybe not even 2016. The reality is politics and race have been used to destroy the American spirit in the past few years so effectively that we are, for the first time in a long time, getting wrecked at the Olympics. And in final sports news, not very good for America either, Team USA men's basketball players frustrated with head coach Greg Popovich. Coach Popovich is very woke, you know. This is by David Lazar at the New York Post. There is more trouble in paradise. Team USA basketball players are grumbling about running head coach Greg Popovich's San Antonio Spurs-style offense at the Olympic Games, according to a report from The Athletic. Joe Varden's report comes after Popovich's squad lost their group stage opener 83-76 to France, a team led by Rudy Gobert and Evan Fournier on Sunday. It was the Americans' first Olympic loss in 6,176 days. The report states the players are frustrated too, grumbling on their way back to the locker room about running the San Antonio offense when apparently they feel like there are better ideas. I think that it's a little bit of hubris if you think the Americans are supposed to just roll out the ball and win, Popovich said. I mean, we've got to work for it just like everybody else. Let's go to the chat. Hello to Quachalongo. I didn't mean to take Monday off. I've got a sore throat, and but I don't want to make that permanent because you know, if you do 5 days a week, I have the 3 culture spots, so that means that there's 2 days in which I don't have to devote 30 minutes to a single subject, so it just makes it easier. Hello to Clownvelt, Dan Allison, Palcasso 88, Walrus Lol Bertarian, Don from Beyond, and Run, Chogokin 666. Don from Beyond says, my 60-year-old sister and her husband have a very large circle of acquaintance. In the last 3 months, 5 of their friends have died of heart attacks, with 1 more currently in the hospital. Hello to Steve. Piers Morgan, I'm going to be talking. I'm glad that Piers Morgan is writing so extensively on COVID-19. As I mentioned earlier, I found myself in the very uncomfortable position agreeing with Piers Morgan about anything, specifically Megan Mertz and her ginger waster of a husband. But now I can go back to hating Piers Moron again. Jim Smith says, I did read that Beale said that she didn't know where her body was during the course of her vault. I also read that she has a therapist and has ADHD. Yes. Hello to our valiant moderator, Chad Chadson, who says America's Olympic team doesn't operate well without weed and Adderall. Palcasso 88. Did you make any money on me not being here yesterday? It's pronounced Biles? Oh, okay. Jan Ellison says, imagine Tom Brady being too stressed out to play in a Super Bowl Well, someone like Tom Brady, I think he actually thrives on the pressure. Star Rover says feminism is trying to normalize the inability of many women to perform in stressful situations. Hello to Matt Beck. And thank you, Clownvelt. What else do we have here? We have seen all the "You Are Here" Venn diagram showing degeneracy, Weimar, Yugoslavia, ethnic strife, etc. Seriously, what is coming next? Well, how about a senile stuttering buffoon is the president of the United States, and the regime media has decided not to care about this. Hello to my trail of disgrace. Do you play tennis or golf or any other sport? Not really. I used to play pitch and putt golf. That was fun. Yacht Club. Hello to William Hicks. Masking it up here. Yeah, I'll get to that. How long is this going? KMG, other than Avatar, this is Palcasso 88, other than Avatar, Clifford, and Inception, what other movies induce rage in you? Harry and the Hendersons. Yes, let's invite a big, dumb monster into our house that destroys everything, because we love the big, dumb monster that destroys everything. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, you definitely invite, Sasquatch into your home, right? Because that's what normal people would do. There's a Screen Rant. There's a site called Screen Rant, and they have a very funny recurring bit called Pitch Meeting, in which a screenwriter is talking to a producer, and they're played by the same actor. The screenwriter has glasses. And they just go through, the plot holes of all of the movies that are being made now, like Jurassic World. Yes, prehistoric monsters, murderous prehistoric monsters get loose at a theme park, and the woman who runs it does not evacuate the theme park because, why would you do that? Because then people might decide that, maybe it's not a good idea to go on holiday with a bunch of murderous prehistoric monsters. And hello to Berkin Sultanov and half a Galician. Any thoughts on the unsolved murder of Victoria real estate agent Lindsay Buziak in 2008? I don't know about that case. I will have to look it up. Oh, someone's talking about Galaxy Quest. Yeah, I love that movie. David Mamet said he made a list of 4 perfect movies, and that was on it. And I really like Sigourney Weaver, and it was nice to see her having so much fun with a role. Oh, let's talk about grown men crying in public, because apparently that's what grown men do. This is from Emily Gooden at the Daily Mail. You guys won. Republican Adam Kinzinger chokes up at January 6th hearing and thanks cops after GOP colleague Liz Cheney vowed to find out what happened every minute of that day in the White House. Apparently, Adam Schiff burst into tears. Apparently, a bunch of policemen burst into tears. I never expected today to be quite as emotional for me as it has been, Kinzinger said, sniffling as he choked back tears. He noted how he got to know many of the officers in the aftermath of the riot. Both he and Cheney hugged a few of the officers at the beginning of the hearing. I think it's important to tell you right now, though, you guys may individually feel a little broken. This is how congressmen talk now. You guys may individually feel a little broken, but he added, you guys won. The emotional day got to almost everyone, lawmakers and witnesses alike. Several times the officers wiped away tears, particularly when footage from January 6th was shown. The lawmakers got shook up talking about their gratitude for the officers' work. You saved the day. You saved the Constitution, Representative Zoe Lofgren told them, as if Zoe Lofgren has any regard for the Constitution. Some of the most dramatic words came early on when Cheney, in her opening statement, offered cautionary words about what would happen in the wake of future presidential elections. She called January 6th a cancer on the Constitution. Yes. Ooh, tough words from Cheney and Kinzinger. Yes, tough words from a man who bursts into tears in public. Yeah, that's, oh, and here's a bunch of pictures of grown men hugging each other. Oh, and here's U.S. Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Gonell wiping tears as he watches footage from January the 6th. Oh, and here's another Washington Metropolitan Police Department officer, Daniel Hodges, weeping and sniffling as he reacts to videos. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. Let's talk about the new rules. Excellent piece by Michael Anton in The American Mind called "That's Not Happening and It's Good That It Is." You see the paradox there? A quick and dirty guide to regime propaganda. Gaslighting getting you down? Feel like the regime has dialed the megaphone up to and past 11? You're not crazy. It's definitely happening and likely to get worse as our masters' ability to cope with reality further worsens, or worse, they gain the complete and absolute control they seek. They're both scornful and terrified of dissent, which explains why they incessantly shriek at us and lie to our faces. So to help you navigate the twit storm, I present a guide to 7 of the regime's most common off-deployed lies. This is not meant to be comprehensive. I'm sure there are tactics they use that either I haven't crystallized or that aren't front of mind at the moment. I encourage others to expand the catalog with their own observations. The better we can understand how they try to manipulate us, the better we can resist and counter it all. Let's start with the unholy trinity of ruling class horse manure. These first 3 are similar, but subtle differences determine the ways they're used in differing circumstances. The law of merited impossibility. The coinage is Rod Dreyer's and goes back to the early debates on homosexual marriage. As Dreyer formulates it, the law of merited impossibility holds, quote, "That will never happen, and when it does, boy, will you, homophobes, transphobes, racists, sexists, whatever, deserve it," unquote. This law is used first to disarm resistance to the latest leftist enthusiasm. Whatever the innovation is, it will have no adverse consequences, none. Purity blockers and disfiguring surgeries have no downsides whatsoever. How dare you suggest they might? Its second purpose is to dismiss out-of-hand slippery slope arguments despite or because of the fact that every single such argument over the last 20 years at least has proved true. Worried that allowing people to self-identify as whatever sex they want will lead to pervy 50-year-old men exposing themselves to tween girls, insist loudly and indignantly that that will never happen, and anyone who suggests it might is an alarmist bigot with a heart full of hate. The third purpose is to enforce a new caste system. Those who get to impose fresh, irrational indignities on the rest of us are in the upper caste. Those who object or have reservations are lower. The latter are not allowed to harbor, much less express, any doubts. Whatever humiliation the upper caste has planned for us, we deserve and must meekly accept. Hence, when said pervy 50-year-old actually does start waving around her equipment in the girls' locker room, if any parent dares object, let him have it with both barrels. That thing that 10 seconds ago you said would never happen, now it's righteous punishment for the retrograde. The law of merited impossibility has done wonders for the left in helping to ram through a wide variety of radical societal changes and cow into silence all opposition. It's currently busy destroying girls' and women's sports, an outcome that we were assured would never happen, though one wonders what the ladies did do to deserve it. The law is a bit passé, though, because our rulers rarely any longer feel the need to reassure normies that everything will turn out okay, that the things we most fear won't happen. Mostly, the holders of the megaphone just skip to the second half, the angry insistence that we deserve it. Michael Anton continues with the celebration parallax. A parallax is the apparent difference in position of the same object seen from different vantage points. For instance, an analog speedometer that reads 60 miles an hour to the driver but 50 to the passenger, even though the needle itself is only in one place. The celebration parallax may be stated as the same fact pattern is entirely true and glorious or false and scurrilous, depending on who states it. In contemporary speech on any controversial topic, or to say better, regime priority, the decisive factor is the intent of the speaker. If she can be presumed to be celebrating the phenomenon under discussion, she may shout her approval from the rooftops. If not, he better shut up before someone comes along to shut him up. Note also that the key distinction here is celebration versus non-celebration, not support versus opposition. One need not actually clearly oppose the subject under discussion in order to be blameworthy. Declining or neglecting to celebrate it forcefully enough is enough. As in Stalin's Russia, lack of enthusiastic clapping is regarded as opposition. The legitimacy of one's right to state the same identical fact in the same identical language depends on who one is and what one thinks of it. Since the left presumes that all persons of color approve of the phenomena covered by the celebration parallax, the parallax is really a test to distinguish allies from deplorables. And of course, you can see this very, very strongly in Canada with regard to pride parades. It is not enough for a Canadian politician to say, alphabet people have full legal equality in Canada, and I'm not going to do anything about that because why would I? But I don't want to march in your parade. No, can't get away with that anymore. You simply can't. They will force you to march in the parade. Anton continues, to the best of my recollection, the origin of the celebration parallax arose from the need to defend affirmative action, a very unpopular policy since its inception. The party line, therefore, goes like this. People of color must be granted explicit preferences to overcome America's legacy of racism so that we may diversify America's power centers and end white male dominance, a move that, in addition to being necessary to address the country's inherent racism, improves those institutions by infusing them with different and hitherto neglected points of view. Also, kids of color need role models who look like themselves. But there is no such thing as reverse discrimination, which is itself a racist term, and there are no quotas, another racist term whatsoever, but only timetables, goals, and measures to evaluate applicants and candidates holistically. On no subject is the parallax more prevalent than immigration. Depending on who's doing the talking, the demographic transformation of the United States is either a glorious trend that portends a permanent Democratic majority and a more vibrant future, or else a conspiracy theory that is not happening in any way at all, no how. The left insists that concerns from certain quarters that immigration policy in America and Europe amounts to a great replacement is dangerous, evil, racist, false conspiracy theory. But a leftist New York Times columnist can write an article entitled, "We Can Replace Them," and nothing. Same fundamental point, except she's all for it and her targets aren't. A U.S. senator can exult that demographic change will doom Republicans. Joe Biden himself can refer to an unrelenting stream of immigration, except they're celebrating it and calling for it. Anyone on the right who uses the exact same words will not merely be denounced, the very fact pattern that is affirmed when Biden says it will be denied when the rightist repeats it. Next up from Anton, the law of salutary contradiction, the formulation of which is, that's not happening and it's good that it is. While the law of merited impossibility applies to the future, this one is about the present. It's what the ruling class immediately switches to after they insisted would never happen, is happening before everyone's eyes. Is the NSA spying on Tucker Carlson? That's an insane conspiracy theory, which is also warranted by Tucker's treasonous contacts with Russian officials as he seeks an interview with Putin. Is the Biden administration inviting in illegal immigrants, then putting them on military planes and shipping them to the heartland? Absolutely not. And these future Nobel Prize winners deserve their shot at the American dream. Once you learn to recognize this pattern, you see it everywhere. It is the cornerstone of ruling class rhetoric in the current year. Well, back to my own country of Canada. No, the Trudeau administration has no intention to legalize drugs. Well, I guess they don't need to because they've already done it. And we have politicians like Gene Swanson handing out heroin to people on the street. Wait a minute. Isn't that supposed to be a crime? No, but heroin, definitely not legal in Canada. Just because the government is giving, top quality free heroin to people, that doesn't mean that heroin has been legalized. The Smales exhortation. Turning from the unholy trinity, we see that the ruling class condemns all of us as entitled boors. In their eyes, we deserve nothing. We have no reasonable wants nor any just complaints. Our only role is to accept getting nothing and learning to like it. Our masters bleat about democracy, but have refined the word to mean getting exactly what we, i.e. they, want. Any ostensibly democratic outcome that might result in us getting what we want is ipso facto illegitimate. Border wall, fascist. Immigration enforcement, racist and fascist. Law and order, double racist and fascist. Better trade deals, economically illiterate. An end to endless wars, catastrophic. And also somehow anti-Semitic. Penis-free girls' bathrooms, transphobic. No matter is too small, too local, too private, or too inconsequential to escape their gaze and slip their punishment. Bake the cake, bigot. Mostly what they bleat, though, is anti-American, anti-white, anti-conservative, anti-Christian, anti-rural, anti-Southern, anti-red state, anti-redneck, anti-working class hate. Every media organ and cultural citadel blares this message loudly and incessantly. The purpose is hard to figure. On one hand, it's demoralizing, which certainly serves ruling class ends, and it fires up their coalition. On the other hand, if you're trying to boil a frog, it's best not to tell him the plan, as he might try to jump out of the pot. Which brings us to the lie back imperative. This tactic and the next one are related to what Steve Saylor has called the war on noticing. The regime knows it's in a difficult rhetorical position. The heart of its argument is that some people are inherently innocent and good, while others are inherently guilty and bad, and must be treated accordingly. To ears insufficiently attuned to this new understanding of justice, this can sound unjust. Tying moral worth to circumstances of birth, not treating people equally, punishing the living for the sins of the dead. Why all this is, contrary to appearances, logic, and common sense, just requires considerable explanation. To the extent that people get it, they will sharply divide between those who say that the advantaged have it coming and those who object, no, I don't. The problem for the regime, therefore, is that while its message is very effective at egging on its own side, it can be equally effective at alarming and rousing its targets. The ideal solution would be to come up with a public message that rallies the regime's base while lulling its targets, but this turns out to be very difficult, if not impossible. Another option is to forbid the targets from speaking up, hence the celebration parallax. But the regime's preferred mode is not merely to allow its targets to speak, but to require it. So long as the targets deny the regime apparatchik said what she said, hence the response to "you are evil and deserve what's coming to you" must be "you don't think ill of me and wish me no harm." Every punch in the face must be publicly rationalized by the victim as a massage. The purpose is partly to bully the frog into staying into the pot, and partly a matter of humiliation. In the oft-quoted words of Anthony Daniels, a society of emasculated liars is easy to control. A great many conservatives are not merely willing but eager to play along. Indeed, whole institutions of the establishment right do little else but reassure their ostensible constituency that the left not only doesn't mean its proto-genocidal rhetoric, but isn't even saying it. It is an odd feature of the current year that calling an avowed enemy a liar, publicly insisting that her plain words could not possibly mean what they plainly say, not only fails to provoke an angry denial, but is welcomed by the liar herself. anything to keep the regime's targets somnambulant for as long as possible. The more Americans who wake up and realize that contemporary leftism is a revenge plot with themselves as its targets, the more will object and try to stop it. This is what the regime at present most fears and is trying to prevent. Anton continues with the enmity counter-accusation. This one is perhaps the most brazen. As I put it elsewhere, the enemy calls you its enemy for recognizing its enmity. As regime hacks spew vile, borderline, and sometimes explicitly violent rhetoric at you, they will immediately wheel and counterattack if you dare object. Don't appreciate being called evil because of your race? Then you are divisive. Dare to put up your hands to block an incoming punch? That's violence. You're just supposed to take it. They're enemies who treat you like enemies while they insist that you treat them as friends. At least, though, unlike the housebroken right, they stab you in the front. A related point is that if you do so much as speculate as to where their insane vitriol might lead the country, you will be accused of wishing for that outcome. It's entirely possible that decades of anti-American, anti-white, and anti-Christian animosity, coupled with nation-destroying trade, immigration, and foreign policies, will not lead to civil war. Then again, it's entirely possible that they might. If they do, the ruling class and the left will bear the blame. Naturally, though, they will blame us. Indeed, they already are. Attempts to head off such a conflict by warning about it are treated as provocations intended to produce said conflict. One can be forgiven for wondering if their plan is to start it and then say, we started it, sort of like insisting Poland triggered the Second World War by shooting back. And which brings us to the last rule. Michael Anton, you're a worthless baby, and if you even think of trying to leave me, I'll kill you. Deplorable Americans are loudly and incessantly said to be the worst people in the history of the planet, pure, unadulterated evil with no legitimate concerns, interests, or grievances. Well, okay, then why live with us? Why treat as anathema even the most moderate, banal attempt to allow some measure of federalism and local control? There can only be two answers. Either our masters know or intuit deep down that we can live without them, but they can't live without us, or else they want to keep us around to administer what they view as deserved punishment. Being neither a psychiatrist nor a theologian, I could not say whether the roots of this behavior are psychotic or demonic, but in this layman's judgment, it exhibits key characteristics of both. But understand this, they hate you and want you canceled and ostracized, or at least utterly subservient and obedient. You owe them no consideration. Their every argument, every sentence, every word are proffered in bad faith. As Mary McCarthy said of Lillian Hellman, every word she writes is a lie, including and the. The regime is powerful, which means we must calibrate our resistance carefully, but to think clearly, our minds must be free, which requires understanding its rhetoric and seeing through it. I hope this short guide is useful in that effort. And this is, again, you can find this at AmericanMind.org. That's not happening, and it's good that it is, by Michael Anton. I was looking at Major Tom's Twitter feed, the war expert, and his snarling hatred for ordinary Americans has reached pretty much hysterical levels. Oh, that it's the people who live in the cities that make all the wealth. No, I don't count toll counting, by the Bank of America or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs to be real wealth. Being helicoptered by fake money by the Federal Reserve is not really a productive activity. And, oh yes, speaking of madness, Watergate journalist Carl Bernstein calls Trump a war criminal who committed homicidal negligence with his response to the COVID pandemic. Bernstein made the comments on Brian Stelter's CNN show Reliable Sources. Well, you can go back to Anton for this, that one of the reasons that the neocons and the neoliberals hate Trump is because he didn't start any new wars, and he was keen to end the wars that America was involved in. But the military told them, no, you can't do that, Mr. President. So how exactly is Trump a war criminal when he was the least warlike president in living memory? Also, America has governors and mayors. Trump is accused of being a dictator, but supposedly he failed vis-a-vis COVID-19 because he did not act as a dictator and seize the powers of mayors and governors. And let's hear a little bit of the wisdom of George Orwell. He arranged for a Ukrainian version of his great book, Animal Farm. And he would not accept any money for the sales. And he talks about his experience during the Spanish Civil War. He writes, so in the middle of 1937, when the communists gained control or partial control of the Spanish government and began to hunt down the Trotskyists, we, that is to say him and his wife, found ourselves amongst the victims. We were very lucky to get out of Spain alive and not even to have been arrested once. Many of our friends were shot and others spent a long time in prison or simply disappeared. These manhunts in Spain went on at the same time as the Great Purges in the USSR and were a sort of supplement to them. In Spain, as well as in Russia, the nature of the accusations, namely conspiracy with the fascists, was the same, and as far as Spain was concerned, I had every reason to believe that the accusations were false. To experience all this was a valuable object lesson. It taught me how easily totalitarian propaganda can control the opinion of enlightened people in democratic countries, which is exactly what we are hearing now. You got to get the jab. You got to get the jab. You got to get 2 doses of the jab, maybe 3 doses of the jab. And then people with the 2 doses, the two jabs, suddenly an enormous number of them get COVID-19. But what? And you have to wear a mask. But wait, no, we were promised that people who were fully vaccinated were not going to be infected by COVID-19. And if the jab is so efficacious, why do you have to wear a mask? And I saw this story when it came out 2 days ago, and I thought, this man has to be kidding us. He has said so many different things on this particular subject that I suppose you could just pick one. Dr. Fauci defends giving $600,000 in NIH funding to the Wuhan lab for COVID research and insists it would have been negligent not to do so. This is from Brian Stieglitz at the Mail. Dr. Anthony Fauci defended the NIH giving $600,000 to a Wuhan lab in 2014 for research into whether bat coronaviruses could be transmitted to humans. That's what they call gain of function research. In Sunday's episode of CNN's State of the Union, Fauci told host Jake Tapper that it would be negligent not to fund the research. Fauci and Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul feuded over the subject last week when Paul accused Fauci of being liable for the origin of the coronavirus. That's not exactly what happened, but never mind. Fauci accused Paul of being a liar who doesn't know what you're talking about. Shameless. Just shameless. Let's go back to the chat. Enron, it is silly, but whenever I hear Michael Anton's name, I think of Susan Anton. She was a tall, willowy blonde, was she not? Birkin Sultanov says, never underestimate the power of informants. We used to live next to a gov snitch. These headlines make you realize that nothing matters except power and control, says Caligula 138. The velvet glove revealed in the mailed fist very quickly, says Chogokin 666. What was the joke? A very good joke that perhaps, this could become a subscription service like Netflix, monthly payment for your upper arm. What they're talking about, developing an oral vaccine now. there are just so many, I mentioned this before, but there's so many similarities between AIDS and COVID-19. And Fauci was there. He was there at the time, and he's still there. And of course, AZT, that murderous drug, was not tested. It was not properly tested. Why? Because the control group, the placebo group, heard that there was supposedly a wonder treatment for AIDS, and so they got a hold of the pills. Meanwhile, a bunch of people who were taking the pills decided that it was killing them, which it was, so they stopped taking it and gave it to the placebo group. Well, COVID-19 has an emergency authorization, not a full authorization, by the government authorities in the United States. And of course, the tests weren't properly done because the placebo group, again, was contaminated. Primo de Rivera, better than Franco, says Caligula 138. Here's a great story about Primo de Rivera. Well, the old man, Primo de Rivera. When he found himself dictator of Spain in 1924, he lamented, I suppose, his poor schooling. He said, "If I had known then where I would be now, I would have done more studying and less screwing." Birkin Sultanov says, now they want to exhume Jose Antonio's grave from the Val de los Caldos. Yeah, they just can't stop pushing, can they? They can't stop pushing. Hello to Josh Randall and Mary Crow. And Caviar Communist, says Birkin Sultanov. Has Trudeau ever been honest? Said Dan. I don't know. He's really a deeply stupid man. I mean, he talks about entropy. Entropy's a good thing. Is it? Really? I don't think it's a good thing. I don't think very many people. And it's, with regard to diversity, he mentions entropy. Of course, he doesn't know what the Baltic countries are, but that doesn't matter. And William Hicks, to paraphrase BB, the robbery doesn't rise to the level of an actual crime. Chokin 666, what disturbs me the most is that no amount of reasoned moral suasion will move these people's position one iota. Yes, this is true. This is absolutely true. And, David A. French, no, critical race theory shouldn't be banned. Yeah, and we have to be nice to these people who want to destroy us. Well, I suppose if it gets David A. French in the New York Times, it's worth it for him. Anyone says, who is more hateable, David French or David Frum? That's a toughie. Frum is obviously a much clever man than David French. But again, why he has a career as a pundit after the disastrous invasion of Iraq it's an eternal mystery. Hello to Kyle Free. I'm shocked that David French has come out in favor of reparations. Yeah. Well, nothing is shocking about that. Okay. There are no countries in the West economic zone, says Half Galician. Well, increasingly, that is correct. The people on what you might call the left in Canada used to be very much economic nationalists. They didn't want the country sold to foreigners, but now we're told that, well, this is inevitable and there's nothing that can be done about it. It's the way of the world. It's science, And, yes. When is this going to end? Is it ever going to end? Maybe I should do this. A few weeks ago, I had an idea for a novel called The 14th Lockdown. And the opening sentence would be, it was the first day of the 14th lockdown. CDC to reverse indoor mask policy, saying fully vaccinated, unvaccinated people should wear masks indoors. And CDC to also recommend everyone in K-12 schools to wear masks, even if vaccinated. Citizen Free Press comments, another round of lockdown hell begins. I don't think that's going to happen in Florida. Canadian comedy, as such as it is, has been dominated for what, 30 years by a bunch of allegedly funny newfies? Well, one of them is in the news for wrongthink. The former This Hour Has 22 Minutes cast member Kathy Jones says her controversial criticisms of COVID-19 measures didn't hamper her relationships on set in her final season of the CBC series. Jones tells the Canadian press she plans to pursue other creative ambitions after wrapping her nearly 3-decade-long run on the satirical news show. CBC's Sally Cato says in a statement that while we are sad Kathy is leaving the show, we fully respect her decision. The 66-year-old Joan denies rumors that her vocal opposition to COVID-19 lockdowns, masks, and vaccination contributed to her departure, which was first reported by Halifax Weekly, The Coast, last month. Jones admits the reviews are a little different than most people, but says that didn't cause discord during production. Yes, I wonder if this is her denials are contractual. But I don't know, good for her. There are very few people in my country who are willing to step out of line. Yes, Politabunny tweets, why are so many of you tweeting the exact thing word for word? I just left the ER. I just left the ER. I just left the ER. We are officially being crushed by COVID. Delta variant is much worse than the original. 99% of our ICU receive a vaccine. Virtually all of it, bots. And someone else had more. This from Change UK, from Jude 5456, from Scott Dykes, from Pooh, Dictator of Monero, from Alex with a Scottish flag. My brother has just tested positive for COVID, the Delta variant. He has been double jabbed. How on earth can Johnson, that would be Boris Johnson, go ahead with relaxing the rules on the 19th of July? It's madness at Boris Johnson. Now, these are 5 identical messages. Oh, look, he's provided another page where there appear to be dozens of identical messages. Mayors responded, a virus so deadly that they have to hire bots to push the fear porn and lies to convince the sheep. Sadly, it works on the weak-minded. When I was asked last year how long I thought that the lockdown would last, well, there has to be a time limit. And I think we're approaching it because the economy will simply collapse. What's the plan? We're going to pay people not to work. And how long are you going to do that for? Forever? Oh, yeah. Where's the government going to get its revenue from then? Oh, no, not to worry. We'll just borrow the money. Well, for how long? Forever? I mean, why not? I mean, come on. If you can get money for free, but it's not really free, is it? I mean, ultimately, you're either going to have to debauch the currency or simply repudiate the debt. William Briggs writes, our global ruler's motto, science created the corona doom and science will cure it. Trust the science. Do not miss the latest and most important section this week. It explains the 5 ways of COVID we have seen and the more we will see. They have not stopped conducting gain of lethality experiments. Trust the science. And I have to be careful here, but there is an argument that has been made that the reason that the efficacy of the vaccines is, disappearing is because it's not a traditional vaccine. And of course, the bait and switch by the jab supporters. Well, yes, everyone must get the jab because if you don't, you could get COVID. But all of these people who are double jabbed are getting COVID. Well, yeah, but it's very, very mild. No. The vaccine was not supposed to be a palliative. It was supposed to be a prophylactic. Yeah. And 99% of our ICU admits did not receive a vaccine, says Dr. Sam Galley on yesterday. Really? Really? Okay. Okay. Emmanuel Macron announced Monday that a proof of vaccination or a negative test would very soon be needed to access public events, restaurants, cinemas, stations, and airports. Since then, more than 2.2 million vaccination appointments have been booked in less than 48 hours. Gray Connolly comments, I have no problem with this. Vaccines protect not just you, but others via herd immunity, especially those who cannot have the vaccine. If you do not want to do your part as part of the herd, there should be consequences. Your duties of solidarity are greater than your my body crank medicine. William Briggs comments, this Connolly thinks it well to have himself jabbed. He, having the tendency to tyranny, all leftists do, therefore thinks you must be made to. He, along with the effeminate Macron, believes you should be starved into submission, for no man in France, after August 1st, will be able to buy or sell without the jab. Connolly, the tyrant, believes it is your duty to be vexed, arguing that if you are vexed, you are protected, and if you are not vexed, you are unprotected, and that you have no right to be unvexed, because being unprotected, you could become infected and in turn infect someone else who is unvexed. To which the best rebuttal is, so? If I choose to be unjabbed and the jab is cost-free and protective, then it is my choice. If I go on after being infected myself to infect somebody else who has chosen to be unvexed, what is that to Connolly? This will not affect him in any way. Yet he would still force us to do what he thinks best. No, Briggs, you don't get it. The unvaccinated are infecting the vaccinated. That's so? Yeah, I just don't. The various things, that are happening at the same time around the world, I'm thinking, is this the last days in some way? Are we a great American essayist, Albert J. Nock, once wrote about how you would know that you were, slipping into a dark age. And from Piers Moron, America's anti-vaxxer lunatics are snatching COVID defeat from the jaws of vaccinated victory with their conspiracy theory garbage and must be stopped from destroying everybody's freedom. Oh, I see. It's not Boris Johnson who took away the freedom from the English. No, it wasn't Boris Johnson. It was conspiracy theorists. Let's see. Put bluntly, a lot of deluded, ill-informed, shamefully scaremongered, oh yes, we're the ones who are scaremongered, or simply complacent Americans have got it into their heads that either the COVID vaccines are somehow more dangerous than COVID itself, or the virus isn't serious enough to warrant protection from it. Some of these skeptics believe the insane conspiracy theory that the U.S. government is using vaccines to plant microchips in their heads to control their minds. Many more, tens of millions of people across the United States, are hesitant to get jabbed for all manner of other reasons, ranging from doubts about the vaccine's efficacy to a fear that they impair fertility, damage pregnancy, alter DNA, magnetize you, or even actively help transmit the virus. Yes, let's throw a bunch of reasonable arguments together with a bunch of crazy arguments. As far as pregnancy goes, is anyone denying this? Because the miscarriages are off the charts. Let's go to lockdown skeptics. Freedom Day. Yeah. The case for vaccine passports is strong, says Michael Gove. What an unfortunate face that man has. Hugh Osmond tweeted, this is actually the point. If you are double vaxxed but still have COVID, you can go to a nightclub. But if you test negative but are not vaccinated, you can't. Unlawful nonsense, responding to Sajid Javid. And White's, oh yes, football was apparently infecting people. This is still a very dangerous disease, says Boris Johnson. Professor Neil Ferguson disagrees. The equation has fundamentally changed. I never thought I'd see that. Neil Ferguson, voice of reason. Can we say definitively that the SAGE models are wrong? Yeah, I think so. End of self-isolation rules for fully vaccinated could be delayed past August the 16th. Outrageous proposal to introduce vaccine passports could split Tories irretrievably, warns MP Steve Baker. Well, and not before time either. Was lockdown illegal? There's been much debate among lawyers as to whether the various non-pharmaceutical interventions, i.e. lockdown measures, that have been imposed over the past year and a half are actually legal. In April 2020, the barrister Francis Hoare wrote an article laying out the case for the illegality of Britain's lockdown. He argues that lockdown measures were a disproportionate interference with the rights protected by the European Convention on Human Rights and were therefore in breach of the Human Rights Act of 1998. To make his case, he appeals to the so-called Syracusa Principles, which were adopted by the UN Economic and Social Council in 1984. These principles stipulate that the government responses to national emergencies that involve the restriction of human rights must fulfill certain criteria. Specifically, they must be carried out in accordance with law, directed toward an objective of general interest, strictly necessary to achieve that objective, the least intrusive way of achieving that objective, based on scientific evidence and neither arbitrary nor discriminatory, of limited duration, respectful of human dignity, and subject to review. Hoare argues convincingly that lockdown measures fail to meet several of this criteria. For example, lockdowns were not strictly necessary since the same outcomes could plausibly have been achieved with far less intrusive measures, i.e. a focused protection strategy. And it's highly doubtful that lockdowns were respectful of human dignity and subject to review, given that they initially prescribed all political gatherings and public demonstrations without exception, a measure unprecedented in British history. And let's, oh yes, there's a good piece by Brendan O'Neill, the editor of Spiked, A War on Woke, I Wish. One of the weirdest myths in Britain today is that the Tories only care about one thing, fighting the culture war. Forget the pandemic, forget the economy, forget the fact that Brexit remains unfinished business. Government ministers can't be bothered with all that boring stuff, apparently. No, the only thing that puts petrol in their engines is waging a war on woke. Downing Street is awash with culture warriors, we're told, all of them shirking their day jobs in favor of plotting against critical race theory or pushing back against the transgender revolution, or taking pot shots at the blue-haired posh kids who run student unions. It isn't true. I wish it was, but it isn't. In reality, Boris and company are the culture war's biggest bottlers. Far from flinging themselves into battle, they're forever caving in. They talk a good fight every now and again. See Priti Patel branding the taking of the knee as gesture politics, or Liz Truss dissing Stonewall's diversity scheme that is actually a woke re-education program for workplaces across the land, or Robert Jenrick telling identitarian agitators to leave our statues alone. But when it comes to it, when it really comes to it, they too often back down. It's hard to avoid the conclusion that the Tories don't even understand the culture war and what is at stake in this strange, swirling conflict of values. Far less are they willing to stomp into the thick of it. Consider Steve Baker. He's viewed by many as one of the least woke politicians. He's firmly pro-Brexit. He thinks COVID restrictions have become onerous, and he's not likely to look kindly on any Trustafarian who daubs a Churchill statue with insults. And yet Baker now seems to think the Conservative Party should genuflect to the politics of identity. He's called on his party to soften its attitude towards taking the knee. When England player Tyrone Mings branded Priti Patel a hypocrite for saying it was okay for football fans to boo knee-taking, and then later condemning the racist abuse received by the black players who missed their penalties, Baker took Mings' side. We need to challenge our own attitude to people taking a knee, he said to fellow Tories. This may be a decisive moment for our party. How about arguing this, that St. George Floyd was not English or British, was not killed in Britain, and that the racial history of Britain is nothing at all like the racial history of the United States. So why on earth would people in Britain be taking a knee? Let's wrap this up with Alex Berenson. Hold on here, folks. What if they're not vaccines? I don't mean in the conspiracy sense. I mean legally. If they're therapeutics, no one can be forced to take them, not without an individual court order and finding of incompetency. How about that? And these mRNAs look less like vaccines every day. They don't act mechanistically like other vaccines. They don't confer lifetime or long-term immunity like nearly all other vaccines. They don't appear to reduce transmission significantly like nearly all other vaccines. At best, they reduce disease severity. That's what therapeutics do. So how are they legally vaccines? Because they use your immune system to attack disease? That's how half of new cancer drugs work. And if they're not vaccines, you don't ever have to take them against medical advice. It's a thing. Somewhere there's a lawyer good enough to make this argument, is a judge brave enough to hear it. Oh, a headline. People jabbed with placebos during vaccine trials will have same privileges as those who are fully vaxxed, UK minister says. This would be the vaccine minister. I don't know. It just, things are reported now where I think this can't possibly be true. It can't possibly be true. And one begins to doubt one's sanity. Rochelle Walensky, MD, MPH, who was the director of the CDC, tweeted, CDC follows the science. New science makes it clear Delta variant is surging and more infectious. Not vaccinated, get a vaccine ASAP. In high transmission areas, even a fully vaccinated wear mask in public indoors to help prevent spread and protect others. Berenson comments, you had me at CDC follows the science. Remind me what happened to cases in India, home of the Delta variant. Yeah. And is a piece at American Greatness, and it is by Roger Kimball. It's called Losing Our Liberty All at Once. Once upon a time, and it was not so long ago, an American could recognize totalitarianism and say, thank God we've escaped that. Can we still say that? Friedrich Hayek took one of the two epigraphs for The Road to Serfdom from David Hume. The other, like Hayek's title, came from Tocqueville. It is seldom, Hume wrote, that the liberty of any kind is lost all at once. Kimball comments, much as I admire Hume, I wonder if he got this quite right. Sometimes I would argue liberty is erased almost instantaneously. I'd be willing to wager that Joseph Hackett, confronted with Hume's observation, would express similar doubts. I would be happy to ask Hackett myself, but he is inaccessible. If the ironically titled Department of Justice has its way, he will be inaccessible for a long, long time, perhaps as long as 20 years. Joseph Hackett, you see, is a 51-year-old Trump supporter and member of an organization called the Oath Keepers, a group whose members have pledged to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. You can see how this ends already, can't you? The FBI does not like the Oath Keepers. They arrested its leader in January and have picked up many other members in the months since. Hackett came from his home in Florida to join the Trump Stop the Steal rally that took place on January the 6th. According to court documents, he entered the Capitol at 2:45 that afternoon. He left some 10 minutes later at 2:54. The next day, he went home. On May the 28th, he was apprehended by the FBI and indicted on a long list of charges, including conspiracy, obstruction of an official proceeding, destruction of government property, and illegally entering a restricted building. As far as I've been able to determine, Kimball writes, no evidence of his destroying property has been made public. According to his wife, it is not even clear that he entered the Capitol, but he certainly was in the environs. He was a member of Oath Keepers. He was a supporter of Donald Trump. Therefore, he must be neutralized. What about the Antifa and Black Lives Matter peaceful protester who destroyed some $2 billion worth of property, killed or injured scores, and toppled countless public monuments? Take your time. The scary and disgusting story of what the police power of the state is doing to those who went to Washington on January 6th to exercise their supposedly constitutionally protected right to protest is being told as it unfolds in The American Greatness by Julie Kelly. For her relentless and indefatigable reporting, Kelly deserves whatever the conservative version is of the Pulitzer Prize. I know it does not yet exist. Joseph Hackett is only one of scores of ordinary citizens who've been branded as domestic terrorists trying to overthrow the government and are now languishing in appalling conditions, jailed as political prisoners of an angry state apparat. Kelly is telling that story with her usual incisive thoroughness. Here I'd like to step back and ponder that loss of liberty that Hume, and through him Hayek, spoke about. Hayek's overriding concern in The Road to Serfdom was to combat the forces that were pushing people further along the road to servitude. His chief concern was unchecked state power, the motor of which was socialism. The Road to Serfdom was first published in 1944. In a new preface in 1956, Hayek noted that one of the book's main points was to document how extensive government control produces a psychological change and alteration in the character of the people. This is, Hayek continued, necessarily a slow affair, a process which extends not over a few years, but perhaps over 1 or 2 generations. So here we are. The important point, Hayek said, is that the political ideals of a people and its attitude toward authority are as much the effect as the cause of the political institutions under which it lives. This means, among other things, that even a strong tradition of political liberty is no safeguard if the danger is precisely that new institutions and policies will gradually undermine and destroy that spirit. The consequences can, of course, be averted if that spirit reasserts itself in time and the people not only throw out the party, which has been leading them further and further in the dangerous direction, but also recognize the nature of the danger and resolutely change their course. My emphasis is on that second if, writes Roger Kimball. When Philip II of Macedon threatened Sparta with all manner of dire consequences if he should invade their territory, the laconic response was that brief rejoinder, 2 letters in Greek as well as English, if. What are the signs that we have recognized the nature of the danger and are resolutely changing our course? You know, of course, things are very much different in Canada where, I don't know, you could say that the tradition of political liberty disappeared, what, in the 1960s, in the 1970s? There's a famous joke about my country. I apologize if you've heard it before. How do you get 100 Canadians out of a pool? Yell, "Get out of the pool, Canadians." And it really is that simple. And, oh yes, in lighter news, this woman called Grimes is in a contest with Azalea Banks as to which of them is the craziest, and they are both winning. This is from Adam Levy at the Daily Mail. Grimes says that her new track 100% Tragedy details her feud with Azalea Banks, the 33-year-old musician whose real name is Claire Elise Boucher. Well, that's a nice name. Chat Sunday on Discord in a link with her Splendor XR Music Festival song set. She said the song is about having to defeat Azalea Banks when she tried to destroy my life. Banks, 30, responded to Grimes' remarks via Instagram stories, writing, "So you go make a bootleg in a song about it. Yikes." I don't know what that means. She continues, "Grimes definitely has some psychosexual obsession with me. I think it's bitterness because she doesn't have the musical capacity I have. Everything she does is out of pretentiousness, and it comes out like that, while everything I do is out of natural swag and geniusness." LMAOO. The New York City native said she was starting to notice all the weird undercover millennial racists hide out on a Discord. Banks said she really thought she did Grimes a favor by not responding to that subpoena, adding that she may just happen to have all those extra text screenshots evidence laying around somewhere. She later deleted the Post. Azalea Banks. Oh, yes. Here's a video of Grimes getting beautiful alien scars tattooed on her back, because that's what men like in a woman. They like to look at her, bare back, and it looks like this woman was severely tortured. That's apparently now a big turn on for men. The Canadian songstress, who shares 1-year-old son, sine cosine hypotenuse, with SpaceX CEO Elon Musk, was slated to work with Banks on a song in 2018. Do you know that Azalea Banks practices voodoo? That she sacrifices chickens in a closet? That she dug up her dead cat and then boiled it? She gets very defensive when people attack her voodoo practices, which are it's the natural religion of Africa, don't you know? So don't ever say anything bad about voodoo, or you will get on the wrong side of Azalea Banks. And you do not want to get on the wrong side of Azalea Banks. She's gotten a lot of trouble on airlines for attacking personnel, and for also screaming, how would I put it, anti-homosexual abuse at flight attendants. So Joe Biden was out in the wild in Washington, and he was walking, and then he said, "My butt's been wiped." And I've seen the video, I've seen the short video, and I've seen the longer video. And what the fact checker says, we don't know what he said. Well, it certainly sounds like he said, "My butt's been wiped." And again, there was nothing about this even in the Daily Mail. I suppose the prospect of the President of the United States being demented is too frightening to contemplate. I've seen this myself. My foster mother, her husband, he'd had a stroke before I entered the house. And, he was considerably older than her. And he hardly spoke at all. But every so often, he would blurt out something terrifying and disgusting. And everyone would, what's going on there? And yes, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America. Yes, fact-checked. Who was it? Who did the fact-checking? Oh, I don't know. They're all the same. They are all the same. And, this is a curious story. And it's in the U.S. Sun. Talent wiped out. Why are so many rappers from KTS Dre and Indian Red Boy to Pop Smoke being killed as gun violence spirals in U.S. war zones? Okay. The brutal shooting death of KTS Dre earlier this month added the rapper's name to a growing list of stars wiped out by gun violence. I'm reminded that Chesterton once said that the purpose of journalism is to announce Lord Jones is dead to people who didn't know that Lord Jones was alive. His death, along with the killings of Indian Red Boy, MO3, I don't know whether that's MO3 or Mo3, and Pop Smoke, has thrust the industry into the spotlight, with insiders saying bullets fly around and loved ones claiming many stars struggle to escape their pasts. And I'm looking at these guys, they're still wearing Burberry after all of these years. Such loyalty. Taylor Maglin, owner of hip-hop news outlet The Daily Loud, told The Sun, "It all stems from the neighborhoods they are brought up in. They are war zones, they are vicious, people join gangs, and the cycle continues. More than a dozen talented rap artists lost their lives in 2020. More still have died in 2021, including Indian Red Boy and KTS Dre. One problem is dangerous neighborhoods," according to Maglin. He managed rapper Jimmy Wopo until his shooting death in June 2018. Wopo has since been linked to the 11 Hunnitt gang in the Hill District of Pittsburgh and has been named in police indictments following his death. Magdalene believes Wopo, real name Trayvon Smart, was failed by a society and lawmakers who do nothing to help kids from dangerous neighborhoods. He said, I think this has to do with where we are as a society. A lot of these kids come from dangerous neighborhoods. People in government do not really try to make it better for them. Yes, it's the old argument from West Side Story. They're depraved on account of being deprived. Well, I suppose one way that neighborhoods in the United States have become more dangerous is for lack of police officers. And the same people who complain about these neighborhoods being too dangerous are exactly the sort of people who use the acronym ACAB and want police forces defunded. Okay. In November last year, King Von was killed after a gunfight broke out near an Atlanta nightclub. The Chicago native was just 26. Pop Smoke died at the age of 20 from a gunshot wound in February. TMZ reported how the rising star was in a house in the Hollywood Hills in 4:30 a.m. when two masked men broke in. I have never been to the Hollywood Hills, but I have seen pictures and I have read about it. Is that considered a bad, dangerous neighborhood now? I shouldn't think so, considering that some of the richest people on earth live in the Hollywood Hills. Pop Smoke's grieving mom, Audrey, said gun violence destroys families and must stop. You see the lack of agency here? Oh, it must stop. Yeah. Hey, gun violence, just knock it off. Okay? Because you're contributing to dangerous neighborhoods. She said, because of gun violence, I'll never see my son run up the front of our steps, taking them two at a time. He won't ever take my hands again and dance with me. He won't come into my room and muscle pose in the mirror. You notice they don't use this word murder? I mean, we're all against murder, right? No, instead it's gun violence. It's these stories are very, very strange. And, so what's happening in Canada? We have a war about pickup trucks. And let's go to the chat first. Any display of white male solidarity terrorizes them, says Birkin Sultanov. This is an excellent title for a live stream video, Caligula 138. Why, thank you. Hello to Pitsky. And, okay, I just think I've seen that. Let's go to the bottom. Okay. Everyone is held to the speed of the slowest kid in the class, says Steve. Oh, yeah. I suppose while I'm on this subject, this is related. Okay. I saw this at Steve Saylor's site. And again, is the world gone crazy or am I losing my mind? Because there's a video from Kimberley Crenshaw, African American Policy Forum. And it lasts, it's 4 minutes long. And I was watching this and I thought, some disgruntled right-winger made this. Because, come on, it's too ridiculous to be satire. And I watched this. It's actually true. It's about a bunch of people racing, men and women who typically race separately. And the white runners always win for some reason because the black runners are impeded by all manner of things, including Jim Crow, which ended when? In 1965? And bad schools. Well, given that black school districts in the United States spend as much or more than white school districts, whose fault are these bad schools? It's too funny, this video. At one point, the woman with dreadlocks is running and a giant hole opens up in the track and she disappears in it. And I burst out laughing. Steve Saylor comments, I especially like how whites are faster relay runners because they unfairly get to carry massive batons stuffed with money. Yes, this actually happens. and the batons get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as the video unfolds. A sailor says, this event would be a lot more fun to watch than most Olympic running races. I want to see this in Tokyo. Anyway, back to the chat. Kontiki Roulette says, if I ever see a story that says 50 shots fired and 2 people injured, I can read between the lines. Indeed. Don Willis says, close call in my neighborhood this week. A bunch of guns jumped out of rack. We're walking around. Well, I can recommend Jill Levy's book, Ghetto Side. Again, her policy recommendations are for more spending on police, much, much more spending on police. Obviously, that's not going to happen. But the tragedy of the book is, of course, that everybody know, but snitches get stitches. That is to say, in the so-called inner city of Los Angeles, there's hardly anyone that does not have a close connection to at least one murderer. They know who the murderers are, and but the clearance rate is very, very low. Because no, you wouldn't tell the police about this. Why? Why, you think it may be a good idea to get murderers off the street and then maybe gun violence would go down? Has Barbara Boxer mustered up the gumption to describe her attacker, says Visionary Companion. I read the story. What does it say? A car stopped. A man got out of the car. He went to grab her cell phone. She didn't want to give it up. So he smacked her across the back and wrenched it from her, got into the car, and drove away. I have not seen a description. What was it? This is in the Jack London Park or the Jack London District in Oakland, California. I assume that there are security cameras. Brandon Smith says, this just in, women dodge draft citing mental health. Okay. Dan Ellison says the entire human race is held back and held down because pampering and privileging these people is our number one priority. Steve says, so Pop Smoke got smoked. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there was nothing in this story about the extraordinary violence of rap music lyrics. This is a genre which extols gun violence. You know, a lot of these rappers, they fetishize guns, particularly, you know, expensive ones like Glocks. Metal Mike says the Prince that Eddie Murphy played in Coming to America had his own butt wipers, so why not the president? Don Willis says, old Joe, you gotta just laugh or you'll cry. Yes, indeed. Indeed. Okay. And hello to Camel69. And let's talk about pickup trucks. Max Fawcett at Canada's National Observer, who bids fair to be the most obnoxious columnist in Canada. He writes, Jason Kenney, who's the Premier of Alberta, may have appointed a new Minister of Culture earlier this month, but culture wars are clearly still the purview of the Premier. His latest skirmish involves a broadside against the Toronto Globe and Mail for a column it published criticizing Canada's love affair with the pickup truck. I'm happy to say that around 40% of the vehicles on Alberta roads are pickups, he tweeted, in what has to be one of the strangest examples of Albertan virtue signaling to date. Maybe Toronto columnists should try getting around this province during a prairie blizzard in a smart car. Cars first appeared, what about a decade ago? I thought, who on earth is going to drive this? They look like Lego pieces. Anyway, Fawcett continues, it wasn't just the Globe and Mail making the case against pickup trucks, mind you. About a week before it hit publish on the column, a piece by Toronto writer David Mastracci made the case for banning pickup trucks outright, one that got the attention of the culture warriors over at Fox News. Both pieces make the same general argument, which is that pickup trucks, which remain the top-selling class of vehicles in Canada, are bad for the environment, dangerous to other human beings, and inappropriate to life in an urban environment. Yes, they want us to stop eating meat, bake the cake, eat the bugs. And no, apparently you terrible people love pickup trucks, so you shouldn't be able to have them. Again, going back to Anton, people like Fawcett and the original writer Marcus G. at the Globe and Mail, they have absolutely no understanding of how obnoxious they are. This isn't just a Canadian problem. We woke up one day and discovered that pickup trucks are a problem, as the Drive's Brett Burke, oh, good name, wrote in a 2019 piece. Americans are batshit crazy for pickup trucks. Both their love affair and ours have important costs, and they continue to grow alongside their popularity. First and foremost, there are the associated greenhouse gas emissions, which are far higher than the smaller vehicles that used to dominate our streets and showrooms. According to a 2018 City of Toronto report, a Honda Civic spits out 149.6 grams of carbon dioxide for every kilometer it travels, compared to 256.5 grams for the best-selling Ford F-150. For what it's worth, the Toyota Prius Prime checked in at just 6.2 grams. Well, fact check. Carbon is actually not a poison, but never mind that. Those emissions reflect the growing size of pickup trucks, which can tip the scales at the equivalent weight of 3 Honda Civics. And while pickups have become more fuel efficient in recent years, the sheer number of them on the road is overwhelming that progress when it comes to our collective greenhouse gas emissions. In 2019, 74% of the 1.2 million new vehicles sold in Canada were light trucks, and some industry experts think that will hit 80% soon enough. But the growing size of the average light-duty truck and its soaring share of the overall vehicle fleet has other consequences. Their height and shape makes them a growing threat to pedestrians, cyclists, and other motorists, which has the perverse effect of pushing some people to buy them as a defensive safety measure. Oh, so we're interested in pedestrians now, are we? I have not found that pickup trucks have presented much of a threat to me. Cyclists, on the other hand, very much have. On a regular basis. They are not supposed to be on the sidewalk. There they are. And they've got these crazy e-bikes now. I was nearly flattened by one not that long ago, flying along the sidewalk at around 20 miles an hour. This is how it works. You wake up one morning, oh, everyone's talking about pickup trucks and how bad they are. Really? When did that happen? Again, some sort of memo goes out. Oh, and this fellow, Fawcett, actually lives in Alberta, but he seems to hate the place. Yes, someone called Lindsay wrote a piece against pickup trucks. The result of all this is a vehicle fleet that doesn't even remotely match our uses. In our society, accountants drive lifted Ram 2500s to the office, and parents pilot empty Suburbans to pick up a sack or two of groceries. Fawcett concludes, nowhere is that more true than in Alberta, where the pickup truck has transcended both utilitarian concerns and marketing magic and become a symbol of cultural authenticity. Here, a career politician from the suburbs of Toronto can transform himself into a blue-collar Albertan simply by stepping through the driver's side door and win an important election in the process. They're all important, Fawcett. It is a powerful political totem and one that won't disappear anytime soon. But if Canada is going to meet its emission reduction targets and Alberta is going to play its part, we have to start seeing the once humble pickup truck for what it is and what it isn't. Jason Kenney is serious about his province addressing climate change. He can lead by example and trade in his favorite political prop for something a bit less obnoxious. Yeah. Max Fawcett, using the word obnoxious, is sailing pretty close to the wind. And, oh, yes, curious story over the weekend. There is a politician, well, she's a PR spiff who wants to be a politician. Her name is Melissa Lantsman, and I've seen her name occur many, many times in the media over the last few years. She is part of the gay cabal that has pretty much taken over the Conservative Party of Ontario and the Conservative Party of Canada. There's a hilarious pictures in Toronto Life magazine of her, her hilarious Jewish-themed lesbian wedding. Yeah. She is very odd-looking and has a very odd, obviously, lesbian hairstyle. And she got into it with a reporter from Rebel News over the weekend who had some questions for her. Well, the police were called. 3 police officers wrestled with this journalist from Rebel News, and he dropped his conservative staffers threw water at him and such like objects. He dropped his notebook, and one of these conservative hacks picked up the notebook and started taking pictures of his notes. Imagine that. Someone called Ronnie at canucklaw.ca writes, Melissa Lantsman is just one of the many people who helped put Ford into the Premier's office, Doug Ford, and later lobbied him. Given the amount of money that can be at stake, transparency is needed. Then again, outlets like Rebel Media need to be honest with their coverage. Yes. The reporter wanted to ask her about lobbying for Walmart. Specifically, how come Walmart gets to stay open? Well, I guess because they have powerful people like Melissa Lantsman lobbying for them. And the reporter did ask the question, I mean, were you selected for your merits or, because of your status as a alphabet person, woman? Now, very strange happened. She is going to be running in a by-election, and one of the leading candidates, it's a Jewish part of Toronto, suburban Toronto, and all 3 of the candidates were Jewish, and a Orthodox Jewish woman was banned by the Conservative Party of Canada as a candidate. They said, no, you can't be candidate. They don't say why they ban candidates. This woman's perfectly respectable, middle-aged woman with a long history of involvement with the community. But apparently they were not happy about the fact that she is an Orthodox Jew and will not campaign on Sundays. She pointed out that other people could campaign for her. And according to her, they asked her the question, are you comfortable talking to people who are not Jewish? Which, if true, it's absolutely extraordinary. But no, Melissa Lantsman, she gets selected because one of her major competitors is not allowed to run. Melissa Lantsman is a hack. Yes, Rebel did ask her repeatedly about her time as a Walmart lobbyist, and that is certainly reasonable. She is officially listed as having done so, and the report is from December the 9th, 2020. It's fair to ask why certain stores remained open while others were shut as non-essential. Her other influence peddling needs to be looked at. While often legal, the revolving door between politicians and lobbyists is sickening. And we see that Melissa Lantsman has lobbied for Perlator, Canaccord Genuity, True North Gaming, Ontario Genomics, Mind Beacon, Extendicare, the Ontario Pharmacists Association, Walmart, the Ontario College of Social Workers, the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario, IKEA Canada, TerraSend, Trans-Northern Pipelines, Harris Canada Systems, Neighborhood Pharmacy Association, 3M Canada, and many, many others. Many others. Canucklaw.ca writes, all of this came after Doug Ford was elected in June 2018. Considering Lantsman helped put him into power, we have to ask if Ford now owes her any favors. The entire point of hiring lobbyists is because of their connections, or at least apparent connections, to the people in power. As for what happened with the Ontario Pharmacists Association, perhaps this will shed some light. This also raises the question of whether Lantsman, as an MP, would be hit up by lobbyists from the companies she used to represent. Also, will Hill and Knowlton Strategies or Enterprise Canada be approaching her at some future point on behalf of their clients? So looking at her LinkedIn page, Oh, you see Director of Communications at the Ontario Minister of Finance from December 2013 to November 2015. War Room Director and Spokesperson Doug Ford campaigned for Premier of Ontario. Vice President Public Affairs, Hill and Knowlton Strategies, Vice President National Public Affairs, Enterprise Canada. Oh, Senior Advisor, Public Affairs, Coca-Cola Bottling Company, 2012 to 2013. Director of Communications for the Federal Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2008 to 2011. You see how these people just move back and forth, in and out? And the worst thing, I'm going to bitch about this again, is that, oh, let's write a political story. So who are we going to call? A PR spiff. Yeah, let's get the opinions of a PR spiff because they're in no way compromised. Canucklaw.ca continues, Landsman was the War Room Director and spokesperson for Doug Ford when he was campaigning in 2018. That sounds like she was pretty close to him. Also, her years working in Conservative Party of Canada can't be ignored. Interesting how David Menzies only asked about Walmart. Could be nothing, or it could be that he didn't want to completely throw her under the bus. Still, mainstream outlets wouldn't even approach the issue of Walmart, so this is progress. In the event, Rebel got the Save Menzies site up pretty darn quick, and they are already asking for donations, but that's probably just to ensure his rights are protected from here on in. While working as a staffer in federal politics, Landsman was lobbied 23 times by various groups, according to the Ottawa Registry. A few of those might raise some eyebrows. Granted, people can vote for whoever they wish to. However, it would be nice if members of the public did some due diligence and looked into the candidates running for office. These things aren't all that hard to find. And of course, Melissa Landsman, like Jamie Ellerton, who was quoted in the Toronto Star story a week ago, oh yes, things have got to be gayer. You know, they're both PR spiffs. Everyone must march in the Pride Parade. Oh yes, I see that a PR spiff is demanding compliance, subservience, and in Canada, they get it. That's how powerful they are here. Let's see, from Chronicles Magazine, and this is Robert Weisberg. What do super rich people with multi-million-dollar summer homes in the Hamptons and similar enclaves think about today's troubled, often violent politics? Frank answers are seldom forthcoming, given that an impolite answer might invite social ostracism and exclusion from A-list parties. But actions often speak louder than words, and a recent article in Avenue lets the taboo cat out of the bag. Home construction is a competitive sport among today's mega wealthy. Small fortunes are spent on amenities, including climate-controlled wine cellars, lavish home entertainment centers, infinity pools, gourmet kitchens, and other extravagances. What then is the most recent costly amenity favored by America's super rich? The answer, safe rooms, also called panic rooms, where the incredibly rich can flee to safety when the enemy is at their doorstep. A-listers are worried, deeply worried about America. Since many earned their millions by anticipating the future, perhaps we should heed their worries. The boom in the panic room business in places like the Hamptons is a trend that may have begun in London when Russian oligarchs and Middle Eastern sheikhs, accustomed to having such rooms in their home countries and having serious enemies, built panic rooms into their British residences. But such home sanctuaries are expensive. Chris Cosban of New York-based Covert Interiors builds luxury panic rooms that run between $50,000 and $300,000, not including furnishings. When one's personal safety is at stake, it is hardly splurging to demand backup generators, large storage rooms, comfortable furniture for the long haul, and tamper-proof electronics, ensuring access to the outside world. These rooms are hardly the sparse Cold War-era backyard bomb fallout shelters one might imagine. It's almost as if well-heeled residents expect the apocalypse. There are 4-inch thick blast-resistant steel doors, carbon steel inner plates, systems to protect against poisonous gases, and sophisticated electrical keys to deter unwanted visitors. The rich homeowners also probably store guns in these hidden sites, though for legal reasons they may be loath to admit it. Tellingly, unlike the outdoor sculpture court that displays one's lucre, Panic rooms are hidden from view and are artfully disguised to blend in with the home's decor. Access is only known to the homeowners. Not even children may be told access codes, and entry may require flipping a hidden switch. A concealed passageway to the garage can offer a quick escape via the family Bentley. Secrecy is absolute, lest desperate neighbors fleeing their own homes seek refuge in yours. Why build such rooms now? After all, rich towns like the Hamptons have existed for decades without this invisible amenity. So what explains the current rush? Clearly more is involved than just the latest fashion trend in conspicuous consumption. One must surmise that these extremely savvy homeowners just don't trust the police and others like the National Guard to keep order if widespread rioting and looting erupts. Nor do they put much faith in government handout programs to cool racial animosities. These multimillionaires know that after Walmart is stripped clean and the Chanel boutique is wrecked, looters will travel out to where the super rich live in order to liberate real bling. Tiffany jewelry, Rolex watches, museum quality art, and luxury cars. And woe to plutocrats who believe they can deter armed looters by boasting of their donations to Black Lives Matter in the effort to achieve racial justice. Elderly multimillionaires are easy targets. Better to hide behind steel blast doors until the looters are finished. Savvy developers are constructing entire safe communities, clusters of fortified bunkers in remote locations. Robert Vicino, a founder and CEO of Vivos Group, based in Del Mar, California, lovely place, by the way, has bought up old military base installations around the world to convert them into luxurious survival compounds. One South Dakota project offers 575 private bunkers capable of housing up to 10,000 people. It is hard to imagine looters traveling to South Dakota after they finished stripping Rodeo Drive clean. Combine the building of safe rooms with soaring gun sales and the exodus of the rich from crime-ridden cities, and you see a picture unlike the official narrative of America as one big, happy, multicultural family. Last summer's explosive urban violence plus the Defund the Police campaign encourages citizens to have a plan B. Some plutocrats may be watching current rioting in South Africa from their luxurious home theaters. These folks disdain political solutions, knowing that in today's spineless environment, it's futile to demand law and order or tell people that importing millions of immigrants from violent countries can only end badly. Rich hedge fund managers summering in the Hamptons amassed their fortunes by accurately evaluating risk, and today they are placing their bets by building safe rooms. Money talks, even when speakers are intimidated into silence. And again, you can find this at chroniclesmagazine.org, and it's by Robert Weisberg. In similar news, this is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. News that billionaire Google co-founder Larry Page has been hiding out on and buying isolated private islands in Fiji to avoid tourists who aren't allowed in once again underscores how the elite is using the fallout from the pandemic to segregate themselves from the general public. Page has been living off-grid for over a year and forced a state-owned news website to remove an article about his activities that was also delisted by Google in an apparent effort to conceal his location. He has spent months in Fiji during the coronavirus pandemic, mostly on the island of Tavarua, and it has been rumored the billionaire has bought at least one island in the country's Mamanuca archipelago, reports the Daily Mail. Page has also been spotted at a smaller island called Namotu, which a sailor named Lorenzo Cipriani claimed Page bought in a blog post in August. Page, who has a net worth of $117 billion, making him the sixth wealthiest person in the world, was able to take advantage of Fiji's Blue Lane program, which lets the super wealthy visit the archipelago on their super yachts and private jets, even when other travelers were banned. So while Page gets to enjoy a sumptuous view of the South Pacific while being attended to on his luxury private island by 30 staff, ordinary people who have lost their jobs, businesses, and homes due to the lockdown aren't even allowed to travel there. Page's story Watson continues, is just a microcosm of how wealthy elitists have rapaciously exploited the lockdowns that they have vehemently supported and facilitated to further expand the economic inequality gap and segregate themselves from the peasants. While Page has his staff prepare him cocktails and the finest cuisine after a day of surfboarding in paradise, children in his home country are either permanently traumatized and afraid to go outside or literally committing suicide out of loneliness caused by lockdown. Meanwhile, the World Economic Forum, architects of the Great Reset, that has been rapidly advanced thanks to lockdown policy, tells people that they'll own nothing and be happy. I'm going to end the show a little early today because, as I say, I have a sore throat, and I think I'll get to Richard Strauss tomorrow. Let's take a final look at the chat. Cut off food and water. Let nature take its course, said Don Willis. Polygons, the end result of liberalism is plunging humanity back into feudalism. Be polite, be professional. Okay, James Mattis. Okay, Mad Dog Mattis. Okay. I don't really want to read that. It might be misunderstood. Oh, look, a quotation from David Berkowitz. Didn't the devil appearing in a dog speak to him, or so he said? That's why we need to destigmatize mental illness, because what's wrong with a man saying that the devil is speaking to him through a dog? Come on, have some empathy, people. Okay. That's it. I'm going to be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. Thank you all for tuning in. Coming up later this week on Theater Thursday, I'm going to be talking about a Polish movie from 1957 called Canal, which is about the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. And on the book club, one of my favorite books, just a tremendous novel, a torso, really, of what was to be a much larger work, called A Suite Française by Irene Nemirovsky, which is about the panicked bug out from Paris after the German army crossed the Seine in 1940. If you would like to make a donation to this live stream, which would be tremendously appreciated at this particular time in my life, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're in Canada, donations to the live stream may be made directly via Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And as always, I leave you with this benediction. In these days of social atomization and a civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to forge a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.